You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Security considerations are the deliberate design choices architects make to reduce systemic risk across environments. Rather than leaving security as an afterthought or bolt-on, effective architectures weave controls into every layer of design. These considerations include technical mechanisms like encryption and segmentation, as well as operational patterns such as redundancy, observability, and governance. The aim is not only to block specific attacks, but also to create an environment that is resilient under stress, transparent to administrators, and compliant with regulations. Viewing security as a design factor acknowledges that decisions about connectivity, storage, or user access inevitably shape the risk profile of the entire system. Threat modeling is a critical method for identifying and prioritizing risks during architectural design. It involves systematically mapping assets, data flows, and potential attackers to determine where vulnerabilities may arise. Models such as stride or attack trees help uncover overlooked weaknesses and rank risks by likelihood and impact. For instance, a threat model may reveal that a web application's biggest risk is credential abuse rather than brute force denial of service. With these insights, architects can place stronger controls where they matter most. Threat modeling turns abstract risks into actionable guidance, ensuring architecture reflects not just business goals but also real adversarial behavior. Trust boundaries are explicit points in an architecture where assumptions about security change. These boundaries appear in system diagrams as the lines between zones, such as when internal networks connect to the internet or when sensitive data moves between services. Making trust boundaries explicit forces designers to ask, what controls are required here? Examples include firewalls at external edges, mutual authentication between microservices, or encryption at storage gateways. Without clearly marked boundaries, designs risk hidden assumptions that adversaries exploit. Explicit trust boundaries provide clarity, allowing both administrators and auditors to verify that protections are applied where risk shifts most sharply. Data classification is another pillar of secure architectural design. Different categories of data: public, internal, confidential, or highly restricted demand different levels of protection. By classifying data early, architects can align controls with sensitivity. For example, customer payment information must always be encrypted and logged under strict retention policies, while public website content requires lighter handling. Classification drives decisions about segmentation, monitoring, and compliance alignment. Without it, organizations may overprotect trivial data while underprotecting critical assets. A strong architecture maps data flows to classifications, ensuring that protective resources are focused intelligently on the areas of highest business and regulatory value. Encryption placement decisions form a critical part of security considerations. Data must be encrypted both at rest within storage systems, disks, or databases, and in transit across networks. Architecture dictates where and how this occurs. For instance, TLS may secure traffic between application servers and clients, while database-level encryption protects records inside persistent stores. More advanced designs also consider encrypting data in use through secure enclaves or homomorphic techniques. Placement decisions require balancing performance, cost, and compliance. Failing to encrypt at the right junctures leaves exploitable gaps, while overuse without planning can degrade performance. Architecture ensures encryption aligns with actual risk exposure. Authentication and identity flows are key architectural design elements because identity has become the modern perimeter. Architecture must define how users, services, and devices authenticate and how those identities propagate across systems. Single sign-on, federated identity, and multi-factor authentication all shape these flows. For example, designs must ensure tokens issued by an identity provider cannot be reused inappropriately across services. Poorly planned flows create excessive privilege or allow impersonation attacks. By embedding identity flows into architecture, organizations align user experience with security assurance, ensuring that identity management scales consistently across both cloud and on-premises systems. Privileged access pathways represent one of the highest value architectural considerations. These are the routes administrators or automated systems take to perform elevated actions, such as database management or system patching. Secure design minimizes privileged hops by restricting pathways to controlled jump servers or bastion hosts. Every additional hop increases risk, as adversaries may hijack sessions or credentials along the way. Architecture must not only limit privileged access but also log, monitor, and enforce multi-factor authentication on these pathways. A well-planned architecture reduces privileged access complexity, ensuring critical resources remain tightly protected against abuse or compromise. Logging, telemetry, and observability must be embedded into design, not bolted on later. Without visibility, even the strongest controls lose effectiveness, as organizations cannot detect or respond to failures. Architecture dictates where logs are captured, how telemetry flows, and where observability platforms aggregate data. Telemetry should include authentication events, network flows, and application-level metrics. Logs must be tamper-resistant and retained long enough for forensic analysis. By embedding observability into the blueprint, organizations ensure that every enforcement point doubles as a detection node. Monitoring becomes structural, not optional, enabling security teams to validate protections and investigate anomalies effectively. Redundancy and failover strategies are security relevant because availability is part of the CIA triad. Architectural choices must consider what happens when systems fail and how quickly backups activate. Failover mechanisms, clustering, and distributed storage ensure services continue operating even during component failures. These strategies are not purely operational. They protect against denial of service attacks and minimize business impact when adversaries attempt disruption. Redundancy also intersects with security by protecting against cascading failures, ensuring resiliency against both natural disruptions and intentional attacks. Embedding availability into security architecture acknowledges that downtime is a vulnerability adversaries readily exploit. Secure communication patterns must be planned at an architectural level. Mutual TLS, MTLS, ensures that both ends of a connection authenticate each other, not just the client to the server. Service-to-service authentication validates that workloads within a mesh or cluster are legitimate before exchanging data. These patterns prevent impersonation, man-in-the-middle attacks, and lateral movement. By enforcing secure protocols within architecture, organizations remove assumptions that internal traffic is safe. Every connection is treated as potentially hostile, and cryptographic assurances establish trust. Architecture defines where and how these secure communications occur, ensuring consistency and enforceability across complex environments. Ultimately, architecture choices serve as proactive measures to reduce attack surface. Decisions about segmentation, encryption, privileged access, and observability determine whether adversaries face hardened boundaries or exploitable gaps. Security architecture is less about reacting to incidents and more about embedding foresight into design. By considering threats, data flows, and failure modes up front, organizations create environments where risks are minimized before exploitation occurs. Every choice reflects a trade-off, but intentional, well-planned architecture ensures security remains integral rather than optional. The strongest architectures anticipate risk at the design phase, setting the stage for long-term resilience and confidence. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Data flow diagrams, DFDs, are invaluable tools for guiding security control placement and verification. By visually mapping how data moves between systems, processes, and external actors, DFDs make it clear where risks lie and where enforcement points should exist. They highlight trust boundaries, storage locations, and transmission paths, giving architects a structured way to align controls with sensitivity. For instance, A DFD may reveal that sensitive data flows across an unencrypted link or through a zone lacking proper monitoring. Without diagrams, assumptions can obscure real risks. By using DFDs as living documents, organizations maintain transparency, validate architectures, and continually assess whether protections cover every critical flow. Segmentation planning builds upon sensitivity and threat paths to define how systems are divided into zones. Highly sensitive data may reside in isolated enclaves with limited entry points, while less critical workloads can operate in broader zones with lighter controls. Planning must account for likely attacker pathways, ensuring that movement between zones always requires validation and monitoring. For example, database servers should never be directly accessible from user-facing networks. Segmentation is not arbitrary. It reflects both business needs and threat models. When executed properly, segmentation ensures adversaries face multiple barriers, reducing the chance that a single breach cascades across environments. Policy enforcement points are where architectural rules become operational. These are the firewalls, gateways, proxies, or identity systems that implement and verify compliance with security policies. Placement of enforcement points determines both their effectiveness and their efficiency. Too few and gaps emerge. Too many and complexity overwhelms operations. Architectural design ensures enforcement is centralized where possible but distributed where necessary, creating a coherent framework. For example, an API gateway serves as an enforcement point for external calls, while identity systems enforce user privileges internally. Consistency across enforcement points is critical. Misaligned policies can undermine security and create exploitable inconsistencies. API gateways and ingress/egress controls are architectural mechanisms to manage surface exposure. Gateways consolidate external traffic through controlled interfaces, applying rate limiting, authentication, and deep inspection. Ingress controls govern how external traffic enters the network, while egress controls monitor outbound flows to detect exfiltration or misuse. Poorly planned egress policies often allow compromised systems to communicate freely with attacker infrastructure. Architectures that centralize ingress and egress controls reduce risk by shrinking exposure to predictable, monitored choke points. This aligns with zero-trust principles, treating all traffic as untrusted until validated. Gateways and egress planning ensure services are reachable only in ways the architecture explicitly approves. Secure default posture is a critical architectural principle. Systems should launch with the minimum number of features, services, and permissions enabled, requiring administrators to deliberately opt into additional functionality. Defaults often define real-world exposure. If encryption is off by default or weak ciphers remain enabled, attackers exploit them quickly. Minimizing enabled features reduces the attack surface and enforces discipline. Architects embed this principle into templates, baselines, and provisioning systems, ensuring secure defaults are standard across deployments. Secure defaults transform security from reactive patching into proactive assurance, ensuring systems begin their lifecycle aligned with best practices and hardened against misuse. Dependency analysis highlights the supply chain and third-party risks embedded in architecture. Every external library, API, or vendor service introduces potential weaknesses. Dependencies extend trust beyond organizational boundaries, often invisibly. Architecture must account for these links by documenting, reviewing, and validating dependencies continuously. Supply chain attacks demonstrate how compromises upstream ripple into critical systems. Controls such as code signing, SBOMs, software bills of materials, and vendor risk assessments mitigate these risks. By treating dependencies as architectural design elements, organizations ensure that security extends not just to internal assets, but also to the broader ecosystem upon which their systems rely. Incident containment and isolation must be considered at design time. Architecture should ensure that when compromises occur, affected systems can be quickly isolated without disrupting broader operations. This involves creating containment zones, planning segmentation strategies, and designing failover paths that avoid cascading failures. For example, compromised applications may be quarantined behind gateways, while clean systems remain operational. Planning containment up front avoids improvisation during crises when time and clarity are limited. Strong architectures build in both proactive protections and reactive containment pathways, ensuring resilience even under attack. Design time consideration for containment turns reactive response into a structural capability. Auditability requirements guide what to log, how to log it, and where telemetry should be stored. Architecture must plan logging pipelines to ensure relevant events are captured consistently across systems, including authentication attempts, configuration changes, and data flows. Logs must be tamper-resistant and stored long enough to support forensic investigations and compliance mandates. Centralization ensures visibility, but distributed collection may be necessary for performance or locality. Without clear auditability design, organizations may discover too late that crucial events were not logged. Auditability makes accountability possible, ensuring both administrators and adversaries leave transparent traces that can be analyzed reliably. Key and secret management must be treated as architectural services, not one-off configurations. Keys, certificates, and tokens are the foundation of authentication and encryption, yet mismanagement often undermines them. Architecture should define centralized vaults or key management systems that handle generation, rotation, revocation, and audit logging. Secrets should never be hard-coded into applications or left unmanaged across silos. Treating key management as a service ensures consistency, scalability, and compliance. When overlooked, key sprawl and weak practices create systemic weaknesses. By embedding secret management into architecture, organizations reduce one of the most common and consequential risk vectors in modern systems. Capacity and performance planning are security relevant because overloaded systems often fail in insecure ways. When resources are stretched, logging may drop events, authentication may time out, or fallback modes may bypass controls. Attackers exploit these failure modes, launching denial-of-service attacks to trigger insecure defaults or resource exhaustion. Architecture must ensure capacity matches demand, with redundancy and scaling strategies built in. Performance planning also ensures monitoring and enforcement remain effective under stress. By tying capacity directly to security, organizations recognize that availability and resilience are not separate from protection. They are core parts of it. Strong planning prevents insecure collapse. Backward compatibility introduces difficult trade-offs in architecture. Stronger controls, such as updated encryption protocols or stricter authentication flows, may conflict with legacy systems. Maintaining backward compatibility may weaken the security posture, as older protocols remain enabled for interoperability. However, removing compatibility too quickly can disrupt operations and alienate stakeholders. Architecture must balance these pressures by segmenting legacy systems, applying compensating controls, or providing phased upgrade paths. The challenge is ensuring security improves without breaking mission-critical services. Documenting these trade-offs transparently helps organizations make informed decisions, balancing operational needs with the imperative to reduce systemic exposure over time. Ultimately, architecture security requires planning, documentation, and validation. Planning ensures threats, data flows, and dependencies are considered upfront. Documentation provides visibility into decisions, making governance and auditing possible. Validation confirms that controls operate as intended through testing, scanning, and monitoring. Without these steps, architecture risks devolving into diagrams disconnected from reality. With them, architecture becomes a living, enforceable security discipline. Every decision about segmentation, defaults, keys, or capacity carries long-term consequences. Security considerations at the design stage ensure systems are not only functional but resilient. Architecture is the opportunity to build confidence and foresight into every layer of defense. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.